Welcome to this episode of The Complex. I'm your host, Katrina Greene, and this is an extremely special episode for me as I have the honor and pleasure of inviting one of my mentors to the table to discuss the power of mentorship in multifamily, but obviously it has application in any industry that you're in for sure. And I say regularly that this is such a small, it's a big business in a small world. I just got back from our the Midwest Multifamily conference, and that there's so many people that we know, and I attribute that to the person that's across the table from me. So just want to start by welcoming Nikki Lorah. And as usual, on every podcast, probably, or almost every podcast, we have to start with, who's Nikki Lorah. So tell me a little bit about yourself so that way my listeners can start to understand why I brought you here today.
All right. Well, first off, thank you so much for asking me. Initially, a little somewhat reluctantly, but I'm happy to share any knowledge that I
But I learned
have.
my sales skills from you, so I sold you.
Oh, hey.
Let's go.
Hey, there you go. Well, I will say just right out of the gate, I left the industry and stopped working in 2016. So even though I've done some special projects for folks, it's on a day-to-day basis, I'm not mentoring people in a professional sense any longer. But started in the industry in '87, had a outside sales role that I did not care for. It was a great opportunity, but from a financial perspective, it was a great opportunity, but I did not enjoy it. And just decided, hey, I'm going to look for something that is fun and that I think I will like. And back then, you found jobs through the print publications and newspaper. So looked in there. I'm an old girl. So looked through the newspaper and found an opportunity for a leasing job at a lease up on the northwest side of Indianapolis. Very, very busy property. Ended up just absolutely loving it and enjoyed it. And that's really where I got my start. Worked there for about 3 years and then moved to the vendor side. And really, that was the dominant part of my professional life in the multifamily was on the vendor side. I had about a 5-year stint where I had a business partner, was a co-owner, and did sales on site where we went into properties and leased properties up for owners and such. So
yeah, I hope that will come up again later. I think it's pivotal because the lessons that you learn doing that work, obviously you were passing that down to us on a regular basis. And then we were passing that on to leasing associates. I think it's mentorship happens in so many ways, and it doesn't always have to be this long-term relationship to be impactful. And I think your time in that business specifically, I think taught, there are things I say to this day that came from you describing that. So sorry to interrupt, but that's coming up again, I'm sure.
We've had many conversations. I know that you and I have shared a lot of stories about that, and I really, it truly was invaluable in my professional life to have those experiences. It was a true game changer for me. Yeah. So
the first question then is, you've told us about how you got started and some positions that you've held. Well, really, we can't stop there. So let's go past SOS. And I know you said you were vendor side, but maybe describe a little bit, the type of vendor, because I think it's relative.
Well, probably most of your listeners, if not all of them, I started out initially with the Apartment Guide, and I was initially an account executive for them and then was promoted to the associate publisher role. Obviously, that was the days where there, again, was a print publication, and then
publisher.
And then for my last 13 years of being in the industry, I worked for Rent Magazine. And I say magazine because, again, that's how I started. It was print publications, and we produced 3 of them out of the indie market. And then moved everybody into the digital side of things, which was, you and I were joking and just talking or having conversations about this podcast about the fact that, I love learning and I love change, and we are kindred spirits in that regard. And maybe not to the level of what we experienced at For Rent, where it was usually fire hose to the face because it was just changing so rapidly.
Oh, that's multifamily in general. We're all taking a fire hose to the mouth every single day.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, then that's how I met Nikki, and I attribute that connection to another mentor that I had, because honestly, I had worked on site as well, and I had worked as a realtor while my daughter was very little. And there was a moment where I was like, I want to get back to multifamily. We always come back. They get us back somehow. And I called Karen Tully, who was one of my first mentors, I would say, and said, Karen, do you have any properties I could come manage? Ostentatious of me to think she would just hand me a job, but nonetheless, I was like, hey, do you have any properties? And she said, I don't. She said, but I think you need to consider vendor side. And I had never thought about it.
Right.
Although I admired all the people that I remember coming in. And so I don't know why I didn't think like, well, I should do that, because it always looked it looked glamorous. I'm just going to say it looked glamorous. And she passed me on to you. And even just the interview process and everything from the start was different in many ways. And I've adopted some of those things ever since. But that's how I became connected with the great Nikki Lorah, was at For Rent. And I sold the magazine for a minute, just a short time, but I was there, during those years when it was like, I remember the day that they said, hey, we're going to pull the mag and we're not going to do that anymore. And, you're going to sell digital only products and, moving, on and moving forward. And I, obviously it all turned out okay. We're okay without a magazine.
Well, but... and just to touch on that a bit, obviously, I had the privilege of working with Karen for literally, I think 30 years, right? but what is interesting about that role on the vendor side, and it certainly wasn't just, the publications, or I would guess a lot of the vendors are able to identify, oh my gosh, this person would be a match. So there's a lot of switching chairs because we have relationships with so many of the people in the respective market. So we did a tremendous amount of that, as you know. So when you're speaking to just the mentorship, we dealt in that regard too. It was really interesting where we would try to match people up.
Yeah. And there's that moment where Karen could have, and she's like the most selfless person on the planet, but like there would be some people out there that selfishly would say, no, I don't have a property manager position for you, but I've got an assistant manager position. I'm sure it'll turn into something later, like come on over. She looked at me and said, I think you'll be successful somewhere else. Go after this, and I think it starts to, I just want to start talking about that from the vision and, from the place of like, if you're a great mentor, you want the best for the people that that you've worked alongside or under. And she wanted the best for me, and obviously wanted something great for you too. And it worked out really well, but
it sure did. Yeah.
I think that selflessness is already sort of, that's intrinsic to someone who is a natural mentor, isn't trying to get anything out of it for themselves, and is trying to say like, no, like here we go. I've done the most I could do for you. Here you go. We're going to set you free and go somewhere else. But, what kept you in the business?
I think just, the relationships, certainly, just developing all those relationships with everybody and feeling a part of something. I truly felt a part of something. I very much enjoy helping people, and multifamily in particular. Fundamental need housing. So, on both fronts, when I worked on site or whether I was on the vendor side, you're ultimately helping people achieve what it is that they're trying to do there. I enjoyed that very much, and it's important when you're talking about a fundamental need for folks. Housing's a pretty big deal. So that certainly, and then just the relationships. Some of those people that I met in the industry are some of my best friends today. So I think it is that, and just the I just really connected and liked it and felt a part of something and felt valued. And obviously just jumping into the mentor side, or who mentored me, I was fortunate to, and I do want to share her name, I was fortunate to start out in the industry working for Sally Royal and Susan McDowell. And a lot of people are probably familiar with Sally, but
I remember the first time I met Sally.
yeah, she was a tough cookie, wasn't she?
Yes. Well, you warned me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in a fabulous way,
Absolutely.
right?
There was nothing more gratifying than walking out of her office and thinking like, "Phew, I think she likes me. I think we did it. I think I proved myself." But
yeah, and in fairness to her, I don't. She's no longer working, but I think her directness, and I have a friend who, we jokingly say, in truth and love, right? So she was very, very direct, and it was a great place for me to start with that, right? Because you had to really develop and think your thoughts through and develop that sense of, okay, I'm not going to go to her until I've collected my thoughts, or she would literally send you right back out her door.
Didn't she actually tell you one time?
She actually did.
I love that story.
She said, she just kind of pointed her finger to the door and directed me to it and said, you can just go back out there and collect your thoughts and then come back in and tell me. And the great news is I didn't have any issue with that whatsoever. And it was probably one of the best experiences that I could have had out of the gate, because they certainly, you full well know, there's a lot of people in our business that are similar and, are pretty tough and diligent about their time and all of that. So
that was a really nice way to say it.
Yeah, I do really mean it, though. I appreciated her directness. And I think I'm somewhat like that. And maybe I wouldn't execute it that same way, I don't think. But I appreciate directness and honesty in a kind way. I definitely do.
Yeah.
And so I think she helped me for sure. And then moving on to Susan and starting there, because I worked in a lease-up capacity for just 7 months, and then they moved me into this training director role. And it was, as you know, I love teaching and I love helping and all of that. So it was a great fit for me. I did that for 2.5 years or so, but Susan was so instrumental in my life and in my personal life as well as my professional life for so many reasons. I could literally talk all day, and I'm not kidding. She was direct, and the primary thing that I can identify today, and unfortunately she's no longer with us, and the primary thing I think that she gave me was just mostly confidence. She, even when I was rough around the edges, she really believed I could do it, and I took that and ran with it. So, it was a different thing than I'd ever experienced, and I'd been in the workforce for, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years before I crossed paths with her, but she was just a real critical thing for me, because she made me think I could do it, whatever it was. She really did.
Yeah.
And then if I didn't do it well, she would tell me and be very direct about it, probably more so than Sally. And again, that was beneficial for me. I'll share a funny story with her. And this is basic, and Katrina's laughing because she's heard this story. And today you might get in trouble if you executed it this way, to be truthful. But we had the training center. Indianapolis was central for all of the properties that they had. I think at the time we had 18 to 20 properties, but it was central. And so the training center was in Indianapolis, and she would come in when we started this 3-day event and introduce herself and, speak about facts relating to the company and her role and such. And she would always do that. And then this one day in particular, she says, "Nikki, can I speak to you real quick?" And, then I go out in the hallway, and she just looks at me and says, "Hey, you need to put on some lipstick. Have a good training." And then just walked away. But even something that, I guess to some would consider that a trivial thing.
Yeah.
To her, it was about the presentation, and
right.
she was wanting to educate me to such.
Yeah.
So it was all fine. We had laughed about that many times after.
But did you just go grab some lipstick, put it on, and get out there?
Well, it was a little too late, because I was already. I walked back in the door, and it was the room that I was in.
Lipstick.
I don't yeah, that's a whole nother subject, but we won't go there. But and she did things like I had a rough training week one time, and the next day she provided me feedback. We chatted about a specific situation. I come back into my office the next day, and she had invested a fair amount of time, mind you, because I'll bet you there were more than 30. She had taken these note cards and put, "I like Nikki because ... and put all these reasons that essentially she thought I was great, right?
Yeah.
And real boost to my ego, and just made me feel instantaneously better.
Right.
And hear this side of her as this really highly regarded, focused individual in her role,
Yeah.
but took the time to soften it up for me because it was a particularly rough week. So, I mean, I could go on. She just really was very instrumental in a personal way, even though you and I have chatted about this, where there clearly needs to be a boundary or a line from an HR perspective with
Yeah.
how much your exposure is to people
Right.
in their personal life.
Right.
But she would put herself out there in a couple of situations where she genuinely just thought it would help.
Yeah.
You know?
Which that's harder.
Yeah.
That's harder today than it was 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
And I'm not, I'm certainly very HR trained, HR minded. I'm usually sort of like the police as it pertains to the HR, and have been for, many years in my
Right.
role, and making sure people are educated on, what we can and can't do, should and shouldn't do. But 20 years ago, my first manager's kids were in my wedding.
Right.
I played the piano at my assistant's first wedding. And I'm only saying that to say, like, those personal connections. And when you said that what kept you in this industry is relationships are what keep everybody in any industry, I believe. Like, no one's going to sit across this table and say, I just really love floor plans. I just love floor plans. Or, I can't wait to schedule a gutter cleaning, and I like residents. And I'm not saying that we don't, by and large like residents. We do. But I mean, that's not what anyone says. It's about the relationship. But interesting that you're identifying two people as being pivotal in your world, and you use the same word for both of them, direct. Mm-hmm. And you use the word, feedback. And, to me, that was ultimately my thought process with inviting you here, because every operator I talk to, any leader, any manager, they're either not providing feedback at all, or criticism or guidance, like, call it what you want. They're not having the conversations that are hard to have. And maybe it's because, one side doesn't want to hurt feelings. Maybe it's because it's hard to say those things to people you care about. Maybe it's because you're like, I don't want them to leave, and like, we're not helping. No one's helping anyone anymore.
Right.
We're not helping anyone anymore by not doing that. And then, I'm not sure, you said it nicely. I'm not sure when people refer to me as direct that it's a compliment. And I'm like, but it shouldn't be so uncommon. It shouldn't be so uncommon. And I'm not mean or wicked. Wicked's always the word you always use, not being wicked. But so I just want to, as we talk today, we're going to talk about that, because right. I think that's the important part. And I could fill this room with people that you've mentored, and they would all say, like, she was direct but fair, and whatever she said was to help me.
Well, I appreciate that. With mentorship, when you shared with me what your idea was, I honestly was a little surprised by that. And it might just be that I'm more removed from things today, right?
Yeah.
I do certainly still talk to people in the industry, and as I shared, I've done some consulting things for folks, but I'm more removed in that regard.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the purpose and the objective of mentoring someone is to grow them up, right, in the industry, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that serves us all well for those of us who are a part of that.
Yeah.
Whether it's the apartment industry, multifamily, or whatever it is you're looking at, it's beneficial to have good people be a part of what it is that we have an interest in serving. So I guess, first and foremost...
Wait, were you surprised that mentorship was the topic, or were you surprised I invited you?
Well, probably both, right? No, probably both. No, I appreciate the comments. I mean, obviously we all want to feel like we've done I certainly don't want to do anything if I'm not going to do a good job, right? I want to do my best, right? I simply don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So, there's some satisfaction in there for sure. And when we all work together, it's a smaller environment for one. So I knew what was going on in everyone who was a part of our team. Really, anybody that I've ever worked with, usually I would know what's going on in their world personally.
Yeah.
Within reason, right?
Sure.
Depending on how much somebody wanted to share. All that being said, you're going through things, serious things with people, death, domestic violence, cancer. I mean, boy, there's a lot of things that we've experienced with people, and to be working side by side with them, I would hope I care enough, right? I mean, I'd be disappointed in my children if they did. I mean, I'm gonna want to be the best person that I can be for someone.
Yeah.
I think, today, you and I were talking about that word criticism. There's a lot of variables, I suppose, why people don't want to time, right? Everybody's so much busier, it seems. Time, there's just so many variables as to why they maybe wouldn't invest that in someone else. But
which is wild, because it's like we take so much time putting out fires, but it's because we're not giving feedback to let that person fix that issue. So it's just cyclical. Like, we're not helping ourselves if we're not sharing with people the right way to do it, or whatever we believe the right way to do it is, so it's like, by not giving the feedback, sometimes we're like, we don't have time because we're not giving the feedback, and it's cyclical. We just have to like take the minute, swallow, take a deep breath and be like, we have to have a talk. We need to talk about this.
Right.
Why is it so hard?
And I view it as coaching, right? You and I talked about that. I really do. I just view it as coaching. Yes. So if all these things are available today, Strength Finder, whatever. You identify what your skill set is, Well, one of my number one things was maximizer. So one of the components of that certainly is to just make something the best that it can be. And you work diligently until you get it there. So establishing what your standards are, which I think that's some of the issue today in being removed from it. I still recognize everywhere I go, there just doesn't seem to be standards anymore. And if you're not going to take the time to identify, laying that foundation and the standards right out of the gate, to be honest, I did that when I was interviewing people, and I would talk to them about how, I would start out after doing it for many years. I would say, obviously it was an interview from our perspective as the potential employer, but I encourage them to think about it in that same way. They need to look and go, hey, is this the right fit for me? Because we didn't want to go through the process again. Yeah. And if I'm not picking up on the fact that, hey, they might not be able to excel in this role. Yeah. I didn't want to redo it,
I think right now, just speaking from an operator standpoint, and it's been this way for a while, when we're looking at employees, it shifted from, maybe 10 years ago where it was, we were interviewing the person and trying to determine if they, had the capacity to or came with the skills. Now we're just in flat out recruitment. We're just like selling ourselves and saying like, this is what our organization has, and these are our, properties, and this is the, and it is a sales position, probably not with enough of what you're saying, where the other side really needs to. I mean, I have those conversations when I'm hiring right now, but I think by and large, it's just like, we're trying so hard to get you, but not necessarily thinking like, is it a long-term fit, is a good fit? I mean, some operators are just like, look, I can't tell from the interview process if it's going to be great or it's not going to be great. So I just roll the dice and I hire people faster. I mean, I'm hearing all kinds of like waving the white flag situation, but I understand a mentor and someone that cares recognizes that it doesn't do either party any good. And you even had me come in, I will never forget it. It was St. Patrick's Day, which I usually take a day or two off for St. Patrick's Day, always have. I like to enjoy all the festivities, even if they start at 5 a.m. And the only day I'd already taken off from my work was St. Patrick's Day. And so I came in to meet with another account executive that day. You know, I don't even remember you giving me a choice. I think it was just like, I need you to meet with another account exec. I need you to understand what this job is and hear it from them, not hear it from you. And that had never happened to me before. And I do that to this day. Let someone talk to a team member, especially if they're new to the business. Like, we shouldn't be trying to trick anyone into multifamily. And we shouldn't be, you know, I mean, we can sell it because I love it. It's easy for me to sell it because I love it, but we shouldn't be trying to, we should be transparent. And that was the piece I think that you were always really good at. So it's like you went ahead and laid the foundation during the interview process to say, like, I'm going to be real with you. I'm going to need you to be real with me. And we're actually all going to be successful.
Well, right, because that was the common goal, right? So you want to, funny, the side note, as you just said, the St. Patrick's Day thing.
Yeah.
I think when I was interviewing you, there was no one else in the office, and there was like a tornado coming through.
There was no, that was when the regional was in town.
Oh,
and I remember thinking, I doubt we do this. Sirens are going off.
I know.
And she still was just like, no, we're good. We're going to do this interview. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, it wasn't happening outside. And it was literally like, it was Wizard of Oz outside that giant window.
I know, and you and I were panicking.
Still going, yeah, but we still had to go with it. I was terrified, but we did it.
Yeah, sorry to get you off track.
No,
there,
it's
but
funny. It's true.
I just now recalled that.
Yes, I remember it
I
vividly.
had not had that experience before or since. So.
I remember it vividly.
Yeah.
But you laid a foundation for the exchange early on, and I have said too, with from a coaching perspective and just from a feedback perspective, I think what we have to do now is, like, whether it's day 1, day 2, we probably have to talk to people about how do you want to receive feedback, because you're going to get it.
Right.
I know Joe took some leadership courses with Tom Meyer, and he says something like that. Like, we're not asking people how they want to receive it. And then when it comes time, like, no one's ready, or we're apprehensive, or we just don't say it, because there's no safety in what the reaction's going to be. But, like, if we were to say to somebody up front, hey, I'm here to help you, and this is what it's going to sound like. Mm-hmm. It's going to be me saying that this is what I observed. And it's going to be me saying, this is a different way or a better way. I'm trying to remember how you gave, how you've given some feedback. I don't know. Do you have some examples?
That might be scary. Well,
you have a phrase you use a lot. I wrote it in my Nikki-isms, for what it's worth.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know about that one, but I think when you start out, it's like every other relationship. I know you would agree with this. It's, you have trust, and you're establishing that when you meet a friend, or with even with your family. You have trust, and you have mutual respect, and you're working on those common values, if you will. And when somebody first meets you, a new hire's coming in, and you're going through that orientation process or what have you once they've come aboard, and just backing it up a bit, when you said, yeah, you asked me to meet with this account executive, that's where I knew that's where some of the real talk came in, and they could really share with you what the experience was. If you wanted to be direct and say, hey, how is she? Or, whatever, they would kind of give you the insight, right? I don't know how much of that happened, but I've had people share that they asked about some specific,
which is smart.
Well, right. But that's why that's a win-win for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I would want people to treat me I would want to treat them like they would like to be, or like I would like to be treated. And I think I can share a story with you of an account executive. I don't know if this is really what you were after here, but where I'm pretty confident it was maybe the first 2 weeks that they were working with us. And anyway, I'm trying to not reveal any specifics here, but
you can tell the story. It's okay.
Yeah, we were part of my responsibility, of course, was to ride with account executives and help them handle their accounts and such. And we were on a renewal appointment. And back to Susan, one of the first things that I learned, she put a card in front of all these people that were in a meeting one time and said, hey, tell me the value of the property that you're working at. And that just resonated with me for my entire career with regard to identifying how much a property was worth, and then really having the greater understanding from an owner's perspective what that really looked like, where some people literally would answer $100,000 for a 632 unit property, and you're going,
you're like,
you're a little off. It's more
let's try again.
Yeah,
maybe per unit.
Yeah, so that looking at the value of the property, I always respected that when you were meeting with an owner or an owner's representative of any kind, because that was always in the foremost part of my mind of this is what we're representing for them.
Yeah.
Right? So we're sitting in this appointment, and this account executive grabbed a soda or a drink out of her bag and, just was, I guess, thirsty, wanted to drink. And then
in the middle of the appointment.
And then after, freshening up lipstick, which obviously apparently I was told before that I didn't do that. Right.
But that I would be distracted if I were the customer. I would have been distracted by that.
Well, and keeping in mind this was many, many years ago too.
Sure.
So certainly at that point that would have not been considered professional.
Yeah.
And above all else, I would want to say that we were always putting ourselves out there in the most professional way that possible.
Yeah.
Because that mattered in the world that we worked in.
It still matters.
Yes. So we get in the car after, and I actually was driving, and we are driving back, and I'm just right out of the gate starting to coach her a little bit about what those two items in particular, not end of the world kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But just where you wanted to identify that would not be something that we would want to do in an appointment moving forward. And so we have that conversation, and I was going to touch on earlier when you were saying, why is it people don't want to do that? Why don't they want to have these conversations? Execution's everything, right? So learning how to execute that so that the message is coming out in the best way possible for the growth to occur. Mm-hmm. So long story short, we get back to the office, and I could quickly identify she's really frustrated and upset, actually very upset, and proceeds to go to her office, and I could tell, and I thought, well, I need to just deal with this right now. So I set my things down and then just went into her office, shut the door, and she actually was crying. And I felt, obviously that's not what I wanted to have happen.
No.
But the great thing about the story is real early on, we laid this foundation where she instantly knew what my motivation was, because we had that conversation. Mm-hmm. Why would I want to share those things with her? What that was going to look like her in the future, knowing those things. Yeah. I'm very happy to say she's extremely, she's just been extremely
very
successful.
Yes.
And her skill set would blow you away right out of the gate anyway. It's just these little things where you're fine-tuning and polishing, right?
Yeah.
It's not end of the world things, but we did have to work through, and I clearly didn't mean to crush her soul. And she looked right back at me in that moment. I actually used those words. I do remember that. My intention here was not to crush her soul. Mm-hmm. And because she was very upset. And I will say that's also a piece of managing people where you have to identify, I need to manage her or him this way and her or him over here in a different way, right? Yeah. So some of that was for me to own. Yeah. But on the other side of it, she looked right back at me and said, thank you, very much. She said, I've never had anybody do that. She said, I've never had anyone take the time to even have a conversation with me like that. And so we the great news is we got that all worked out.
Yeah, a lot of growth in that.
Yeah. But over
small window of time.
Over something that, for some might see, you wanted to have a presence about you because these assets represent a tremendous amount of money in our arena, right? So
Absolutely.
You take things lightly, or certainly I never felt like we should. I think that's still critical today because, there's a lot of money invested here. So it's not just a couple $1,000s. We're talking about representing their asset that's tremendously valuable. So
I stole that from you early on, and still I teach CALP, used to be NALP, but CALP. I teach it regularly for the apartment association, and I start every class. It's not in the curriculum, but I start every class with the exact way that I saw you start back when we used to do leasing training as a sort of like free service, which was my favorite thing ever. Still. We do an exercise, where they take they do their unit count times what at this point would be a very conservative valuation, and should sort of meet all, and their faces when they look at their phone calculators and realize like what their community is worth,
yes.
In a roundabout way. They're like, whoa. And I tell them that I used to sell for rent, and that I would walk in the door and I would have leasing associates say to me, I'm just a leasing associate. I'll go get my manager. And I would say, oh, no.
Right.
You are the frontline person for a multi-million-dollar asset. And those are your words, and you probably know it. So I would be like, no, you are the frontline person for a multi-million-dollar asset. Be proud of that. You and I absolutely should talk for a bit. And I know that I wasn't doing that to get sales, but I knew that was smart for me to give that person attention, because guess who those people are now?
Right.
Or were,
right.
Over
You're
time,
advocate, yeah.
They were managers, they were advocates, they felt valued, they had a voice, but they had to be reminded of the value. And this is a serious business. And if we're not articulating that appropriately at the beginning, of a leasing career, then we're making mistakes, not to scare people, but to say, hey, be proud of what you do. Understand when I give you feedback, it's because this is a professional environment, and I want you to be viewed as a professional, and I want you to get treated like one too. Right. And there's a difference in the way people treat you by the way you act. Right. So I think that's great feedback.
And what their knowledge is, right?
Yes.
The more knowledgeable that they are really matters. It's very significant. So look at that, right? You're sharing the story that I was able to pass down from Miss Susan McDowell.
Yeah, that's how it happens.
Yeah.
That's how it happens.
That's how critical that is. And that was back from 1987. So here you go.
Nailed it. Yeah. I told someone the MCL story the other day on your birthday. Because
you're gonna have to share a little bit now.
I was with Nikki, I think on I'm not sure which birthday it was, and I won't say because I'm not confident, but we were at an appointment. We were on the north side. We were like near St. Vincent, and you took a phone call, and I was driving, and we had talked, like lunch was definitely next. We're eaters, and lunch was next. It was important. And so as she's on the phone, I just whip it into MCL, and she gets off her call, and she was like, MCL? And I was like, I thought you wanted to eat with your people. And you remember we went in there, and Sherry Helmer was in there also. Yes. Shout out to Sherry, longtime leasing trainer. So, I mean, it was just funny that you were with your people. It happened.
Well, another, just to give Sherry some props, another mentor indirectly. I did not work for the company ever that she was the training director for, but I had the privilege of watching her speak a couple of different times and being involved in that. And you and I have talked so much about training is a process, not an event.
Yep.
And that's who I learned that from. Yeah. So Sherry was a mentor indirectly as well.
That was number 2 on the short list of things that I quote regularly that I learned from Nikki Lorah. Training is a process, not an event. Yeah. And I say it a lot. And I also just think this goes back to where you said execution is everything. The reason I repeat your words verbatim is because of the execution. Like, it worked. So why would I change it? I don't paraphrase. I do give you credit. So I don't always use your first and last name, but I'll say, I was taught.
It's not necessary on my account. Just
well,
for the
right.
record, but,
I'm just saying I don't, I make sure that people understand that I've learned it from someone else, but execution is important. And I think, honestly, if I'm thinking it back to all my years in working with managers, I'm not sure that they're afraid to say it. It's that they don't know how to say it. They don't know the actual words to say to someone, to say, we wouldn't do that in an appointment going forward. And that wasn't, I mean, to me, that was a great way to say it. That wasn't like trying to say, you know, you weren't trying to dramatize it and say like, wow, you wrecked that appointment. You know, but it also wasn't making so light of it that the message was lost. You said that like, it's important, like it has to accomplish what it has to accomplish. So if you make a joke about it and say, well, next time, make sure there's a drink in there for everyone. Like that's not going to work either. You said what needed to be said. But you were good at words. You've always been great at words. And that's what we're missing. That's what we're missing. People aren't great at words.
My family might disagree with you on that. No.
What?
Yeah, right. I think, gosh, I mean, you're just all these thoughts as you're saying things. It's, I mean, do you not think it's all the changes that are happening right now, listening to you just comment on what you just commented on, how are people doing? You know, I'm somewhat removed from that. So how do you do that today when you really don't have, there's so many people not working, they're working remotely and they're not able to be in the same space to have the benefit of hearing the execution of things.
Yeah, proximity is sort of the death of some of mentorship, because if we aren't right next to great people, listening to them, absorbing things that they said, you know, and it can, I mean, you know, some leasing offices are very, you know, tight, like you feel like you can't get away, like you couldn't, you know, and you have managers over time that have, you know, 1 year on the leasing associate and, you know, 1 year in here, and they can get up and say, you know, hey, that was great. I heard how you executed that. Let's write that down and use that. But then obviously on the other side, be able to come in and say, you know, hey, if we're talking about revenue optimizing software, like, let's not just say, well, the price changes daily. So, you know, like there's just a different way to execute it. I think it all gets down, you know, to the actual words that are used. And so I also think there's a lot of times that managers absolutely know what to say, what needs to get said. They just aren't sure how to formulate it in words. And they're uncomfortable with the predictability and reaction. Like, you didn't know how that AE was going to react to the feedback. You knew it was your job to give it, and you knew it was in her best interest to receive it.
Right.
And the people that are most successful are the ones that come back and say, thank you for sharing that with me. And that we're missing too. Because honestly, like, one exchange, I think, between a manager and a leasing person, let's just say, that is healthy like that, where the manager says, hey, I want to give you some helpful information today. You know, from my experience, this is what I observed. You know, this is what happened, and can I give you a different way to try? You know, I promise you I'm here for your success. And for this person to then, instead of flipping out or saying, why do you hate me? Or, you know, having an emotional response. I'm not saying you can't have any emotional response. Sometimes it's hard to hear, and especially if there's no practice. She hadn't had any practice hearing feedback and said it to you.
Right.
You know, but after that first, like, if we could just break the ice, people, and just start to do that feedback early, and then have that person say, gosh, thanks.
Well, feedback early, but also for that to be a continuation and not to just look, coaching is multi-layered, right?
Yeah.
It isn't just
also a process, not
right.
an event.
It's not just to point out only growth or negative type comments, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you're reassuring them and giving them affirmation when you do witness something that is positive, and oh my gosh, you did a really great job there. But hearing we would talk about that often in the trainings that we offered, and as Katrina pointed out, we offered that the leasing training as a free service. So we did it. I mean, gosh, we did it all the time.
So fun. Fondest memories.
Yeah, it was very fun. But you know, when you're in that setting and you're hearing the execution being offered, to your point, by all these people, then the hope is, we don't want it to sound canned, and you don't have to read it verbatim off of some script.
Yeah.
I mean, the objective was for you to develop your own way to execute that. So I think that's where not being in the same building or space as people, I'm not sure how, I really don't know how you would be able to be more successful at that today by not hearing it, because you need to hear it from lots of people to develop your own.
I like to think about it in an environment with like digital mentorship and what that even looks like. Like I think we've done. You taught me early on to listen to phone calls, leasing calls, and I still do it all the time. It's my favorite nighttime activity.
Oh my gosh.
Still to this day. And it's like, that is a way I can mentor people from afar. So I used to, I'd listen to a call and then might call someone on Teams or, whatever. And just like, at this point, I just record my review so that way somebody can watch it at their leisure. Because, for me, I'm stronger if I do it in the moment and start and stop it. And so I've just now recorded phone call reviews while I'm listening to a recorded call, and I just send it to the agent. Like that's the closest thing I can do closest thing to leasing mentorship that I can do today. And even that, it's like hard to say, like you're always talking about like, oh, I'm removed from it. And it's like the only piece that is not the only piece, but like a piece that is dramatically different is that we have stopped relying on humans to do the follow-up, and we've switch that to an AI environment because we just have to have consistency, not perfection. Perfection would be these great salespeople that absolutely do exist out there, but there's not enough of that to be consistent. So we're using AI for consistency, but we still need them to come in. Someone has to come in and close it. Someone has to come in. There is a point where it happens, and we do still have to teach them. So to me, the only way that I can mentor and teach that, it's almost impossible. I can't go to a site as a director for sure and wait for a call to come in and sit beside them and be like, put them on hold. Okay, say this. Put them on hold. Say this.
Oh my gosh.
Now, the closest we can come to that is like, there was a day where an agent was using a texting platform that's on the computer. And so he is a very new leasing person, but gosh, just so hungry. And I love it. He was, in this process of texting someone, so he had time to formulate responses. And it's little things that are big things, like where you said knowledge earlier, like how if you're knowledgeable. So like the question was, what's the difference between this floor plan and this floor plan? And his response was going to be a square footage number. And I was like, no. I was like, because square footage is just a number. Say where they get the space. Say that they get 2 walk-in closets instead of 1, and they get side-by-side washers and dryers instead of stackables. Right. I was like, do you see how that's different from saying 112 square feet? And he's like, absolutely. So, really great teachable moment, but I can't really be over everyone's shoulder, but gosh, I just wish that I could.
Does it still, I know when I started out as a leasing person and I would shadow various leasing people, does that still occur, or?
I am going to just say that it should and it doesn't. And I remember. Because
that's a tremendous
I just
help.
told someone the other day. It was Erica Metzger.
Oh my gosh.
I just told her the other day.
Dropping names all
right.
over
Isn't this fun?
today.
This is fun.
Yeah.
She was one of my first stops. I think she was my first stop, Lighthouse Landings, that I was allowed to go on by myself because you had me with you, I think for 2 months. And I remember in the moment feeling like a pony needing to get out of the gate. I was a racehorse. And I was like, let me out of the gate. I'm ready to race. I wasn't ready to race, but I thought I was ready to race. And I was probably bucking if I know myself well enough. But that foundation was probably the best thing that could set both you and me up for success. And that was important. And so that way, once I was out there, and not like I could have done anything earth shattering, but you didn't want anyone's first experience with me to be new girl, to be less than. Like you wanted, well, and also I had big shoes to fill, and I knew it because I replaced Wit. And I'm not saying I replaced Wit because nobody can replace Wit, but I'm just saying like I knew coming in about this, just like following that she had. And so, I understand why you did that. If we gave that same time and attention to our rookies, it would be a different relationship from the get-go. And also it would just be, you would have this freedom. We would have freedom so early on to give all the feedback. So it would feel so natural down the road. It would feel natural if, 6 months down the road, there was something that you had to say, hey, we need to do better in this, or we need to do better in that, because we have already manifested that environment early on, but we don't. We're like, hey, here's your desk.
Turn them loose.
Here's your cute little gift on day one. That's a phone. That's a computer. Here's all the software, all of it, because there's a lot. navigate your way through and ask me questions if you have it. And so I don't think that anyone really takes the time to have that immersive environment that we had. And I think that is part of the problem. I think that was part of the problem too.
Well, and when you said, I didn't want you to, be the new girl or whatever, I'm sure some of that was truth as well.
Yeah.
But I think more importantly, it was, I didn't want you to be frustrated to the point where you would then go, okay, I can't do this. I'm done. Not that you're that type of personality whatsoever, because you are not.
No.
But you understand what I'm saying there. It's the frustration.
You wanted me to be confident.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The frustration.
There's safety there.
Because there were so many different layers, and you just had to have a little bit of that exposure to even have a starting point. And obviously that's with a lot of different professions, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't want to set you up to where you would be frustrated. And I had that experience. I mean, as much as you're complimentary towards me or about me and my managerial or leadership skills, it's certainly there are some that the connection wasn't the same for a variety of reasons, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully I learned along the way too, okay, better not do things that way again,
Yeah.
Because you want the best for your team. And again, that smaller environment and really our industry in to your point when we started, it's a small little world,
so
really.
Small.
Yes.
It's so small.
But fabulous. There's so many
Yeah.
just terrific people in this business. There really are. And I miss a great deal of them. And and as I said, I still get to have the benefit of speaking to a lot of them so I can, learn about what's going on quite often still. So
Yeah. Can we educate just, for someone that's been in the business a long time, they're just going to go, And for someone that's newer to the business, they need to understand really quickly that there's every person you interact with, you should probably adopt the golden rule. Like whether it's, treat them as you want to be treated or treat them as they want to be treated. Whatever your philosophy is on that, because what I learned at For Rent is how quickly people change roles, sometimes change sides.
Yes.
Like you wanted, and you should just want to treat everyone with kindness and fairness anyway, but let that be a lesson to someone that might be newer that's listening. I remember a property manager at a property. And I used to visit all the time. I brought my leads reports. Like I was going in and doing the things I'm supposed to do. I was ready to talk about the packages that they had, see if they had any needs. And I had done it multiple times. And she told her regional manager to cancel because I never came. And I was like, oh, no. Like, I know that I can tell you the property. I can tell you the name of the manager. I can tell you the name of the regional. I'm not going to say any of them out loud. But, yeah, I mean, she definitely lied. I ended up talking to the regional, explained to her absolutely that I had been out there, that we were trying to work on some different things. I mean, I think I was actually trying to reduce their package. Funny enough, I was, thinking I need to take a hit on this revenue because it's good, right, and fair for this property because of what's going on at this property. And so then fast forward just a little bit past that, and here I am, a regional property manager at a well-known company. The first resume I get is her.
Wow.
Saying like, hey, if you have any positions. And I'm just thinking like, no, for a variety of reasons. And she was steadfast that she needed to cancel because I hadn't been there, whatever. And I'm just like, and even in trying to figure out if it was just a sometimes they confused their reps. Like sometimes I would be confused with maybe a rep from another ILS or magazine or whatever. And it wasn't like that, but I'm just, and I'm not a wicked person at all. If there were, nonetheless, I was just like, nope.
Small world, right?
My first manager, at some point, like we all cycle through in different ways. So now she's my marketing rep, but I was her marketing rep once. And before that, she was my property manager. Oh, wow. And I mean, that's over the course of many, many years. It's not like it's a hopper, but I just, you and I have talked about just that genuine, the way that you treat people. And how important that really is. And I think that speaks to, if you're in a leasing office or you're in an environment where you're not learning the right things and you're learning the wrong things, like like learn those lessons and then move on and find yourself a mentor. You know, how can people find a mentor, you think? I mean, I don't remember asking you. I feel like it just happened very naturally because of who you are, and I feel lucky for it. But if someone else is out there, where can they look for a mentor, you think?
Well, I personally just think it's everywhere, right? Meaning, obviously I can have a mentor with the person who was my direct report, whether I was the leader or whether it was, I mean, you can have the mentor on the mentorship in that way. But I think there's a tremendous amount of benefit from a mentoring standpoint, just if you're just at the table and you have exposure to the conversations, listen, learn, don't think you have it all figured out. Because as soon as you do, it's changing, number one, but also just to educate you more and be the subject matter expert about whatever the subject is, right?
Yeah.
It's I don't see people doing that as much, where it can be that you were talking about learning how to execute something.
Yeah.
That's along that same vein where you're saying, okay, just watch and listen to how somebody else executes it, and it might serve you in the future in some way. I think you can find mentorship in that way.
That though, I'm telling you, Nikki, and I'm going to be an old person right now. It's like a dying breed. It's a lost art. Like I can think of, well, like what you just said, I thought Karen Tolley, I'm not saying I don't now, but I mean, like I'd never heard someone speak so eloquently and calmly and poised as her ever. Mm-hmm. And I was young, I was 21, I think, when I probably first encountered her.
You just had such great respect for her.
Yeah. But I mean, she would come on site and she was, kind and friendly. She wasn't, the suits, as people say, like when it's like corporates here. I never understood what later in life when I met people that would be like, oh, corporate. Like I was just like, yeah, corporate. Corporate's coming. I love it. I'm like Elf. I'm like Santa. That's how I've always felt. And then in return, that's how I think people feel about me. But I've been told that's not the case. I'm just saying, like, because my perspective of that is different. My perspective is that they're all Karen Tolleys, and I'd love to be a Karen Tolley. And I listened to how she executed things. I listened to how she talked to my manager, Gina, and I was just picking up on that. But you know what that takes? That takes eyes open, ears open, head up, open and ready. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, definitely over the years, it's like you go into a leasing office and it's just like speak when spoken to, or on a phone. You know what I mean? Life happening in a phone, but passing by out here. And It's really sad. If I think about like the last 9 years where I was, the company I was at before, one or two did what you said. One or two said, hey, Katrina, how would you say that? Or can you say it again? I'm going to write it down. Help me, teach me. Nobody's asking.
Let's speak to that a minute. So is that incumbent on the property manager, or who is that incumbent on to instill that standard? So are the standards just not being established because people are just busy, or because it really is a different type of professional? Like what is
you
that?
You mean in terms of just like paying attention or recognizing how important it is to learn from each other?
Or, if somebody's looking at their phone,
and
they should be
problem.
worried about leasing apartments, I'm probably going to, in my time, I would have said, hey, Katrina, I would help that person find something to do that would be more revenue producing, right?
Yeah, I use that phrasing a lot. Is that making you any money?
Yeah.
Because it's,
if that's not important to them, right, we have to, as a leader, we have to instill in them why is that critical and what the focus, and we obviously would instill in them what the focus should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So someday getting them there, they may not be there in the beginning. Obviously, that's what happened to you and I, because somebody took the time to say, this is your primary role, this is your primary responsibility. Obviously, in most businesses, it's about driving revenue.
Yeah.
So there's a whole host of other things that come with that.
Yeah.
But revenue is king, right?
I think the phone situation's like that's probably a whole nother podcast. It's on like, just, I don't know. It's an addiction. I'm,
No,
I'm reading a book about it right now.
I agree.
Just because
I agree
it's
with
the
you.
distraction.
It's different, right?
But even phone aside, just the hunger to be better, the hunger to have, to know more today than you did yesterday. It's almost like, unless there's a carrot dangled to it, there's no like intrinsic motivation to learn more. Like, all I want to do is keep learning. That's who I am. That's who you are. It's also what's made us both very successful. And a lot of people in your orbit too was like, no, we're going to figure these things out. We're going to put the time in. But
oh my gosh.
I think it's like, I told someone, was it yesterday? I don't even know. I don't know who I was talking to. It might've been a convention, but I was just like, I'm not going to say it's generational, because I don't know that that's the case, but it's the difference between, like, I went up to the buffet and I filled my plate, and a lot of people are sitting waiting to be served. Mm-hmm. And so it's like that, this is where I'm trying to figure out like the disconnect. Like, is it that people are going to the buffet and there's nothing there? I don't know. Is it that the manager's not saying, I'm going to meet you in the middle. You're going to ask for help and I'm going to give it. But it's almost like it is a waiting game. It seems like they're just sitting there waiting, and then they get great training, whether they like it or not. I impress it upon them in the moment. No one's asking for it. No one's even messaging me on Teams and just saying, could I get 10 minutes of your time? I want to talk to you about how I handled something with a resident and see how you would do that differently. Like, what would Katrina do?
Oh my gosh.
They don't do it. They don't do it.
And we definitely had those conversations.
We definitely did.
And I remember, we would have, even back in the time when we worked together, and certainly before, we had a remote kind of a setup, so to speak, because in terms of where you weren't in the office all the time, right?
Yeah,
you were out in the field. So we would always have meetings, which salespeople don't enjoy and don't ever want to come in, and they were painful at times. But I really believe that collaboration is absolutely critical to being successful with anything that you're doing, because somebody else's view is just their view, and it might be different than yours. And so to take that in and, oh my gosh, they've had success doing this, I'm going to try that. I could give 1,000 examples of our meetings where that was the case. And in particular, because of how quickly the technological advancements were with the products, we would roll stuff out and there wouldn't be support on a company level. So we just simply had to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
And the great news is I made you all carve out the time, which you hated me for.
Yes.
But in the end, I think it served us all very, very well. And you talk about some tremendous collaboration. I can't tell you how much I learned from all of you by having that exposure.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable, the things that would come out of that, So that's very unfortunate. I would encourage people to take a step back and think, gosh, what could I do different in that regard to learn or just advance my knowledge in some way? And just by listening to somebody else is certainly a great way to do that.
Yeah.
I can tell you, too, you were talking about generational. Our son had the experience. I've been able to witness it from that angle with once he was out of college and his experiences. And one of his first positions for sure, where it was a similar field to what he's currently doing, little bit smaller company. So some of those, the structure of the company is just different. And I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but just listening to him and hearing about what his role is and what he was doing, wasn't as happy in the first role. And the overwhelming underlying message to me was his value. He didn't feel that he was contributing. And so, now fortunately he's in doing a similar role, but feels very valued in a lot of ways, right? And I'm not talking just monetarily. I'm talking even just with what his contribution is matters. And it makes you feel better as a person, right? So wanting to just circle back to that and say some of that is on the person, on the employee, clearly. To your point, they have to want to They have to have enough of that drive to have an interest in just getting better, being better. I really almost, it's hard to fathom that a bit because I just don't want to bother with it if I can't be good at it. And, maybe that's just a competitive thing. Yeah. There could be a lot of podcasts on, what motivates somebody. But as I think as a leader, I would also encourage those folks who are in that role to take a step back and re-examine what can you do to push that a little. What can you what can you do different? Yeah, we've all been through a lot just with what's gone on in our world. So this is like never before kind of a scenario in some regard where you're like, okay, I maybe need to just start over a bit and re-examine how I'm approaching some things. But I do think that we can. If you're in a leadership role, I think you can drive the bus on that and make a difference. I really do believe that.
Definitely need to practice what I preach in some regard. And I just, meaning like even that is a difficult conversation, like saying out loud to your organization or any organization, especially to, entry-level folks that are saying, with their words that they want to grow and be a leader and be this, and then with their actions, showing a plateau, or just showing or not showing anything, any energy, whatsoever towards growth or any asking,
or just the initiative.
Taking the initiative. If you could find the secret sauce to teaching initiative, like we will pay you millions of dollars. This whole industry will make, if you can, because that is sort of like the overwhelming, like, well, no one's got any initiative today. No one, I used to ask for work to do. I used to look for work to do. I used to be in my manager's face asking questions, and she probably wanted to say, can you please go away? And she never did that to me, which is great. But I think that's the other piece too. It's like probably early and often the leader should be testing the waters by inviting that person in and saying, hey, I'm going to go over this with the assistant today. Do you want to sit in?
Oh, that'd be awesome.
And if that person's like, nah, I'm good, then I think
there's my answer.
You start, maybe then you just start to, understand everyone deserves the same energy for sure, but it's like action reaction. If that's my action and I say, do you want to sit beside me and hear this? Do you want to do this? Whatever that is, but that takes also, a strong, confident manager or strong, confident assistant. I know in Joe's world on the podcast that we did with him, he talked about how, there are some people that didn't ever want to teach him because they felt threatened in a way, like he was young and he didn't have the knowledge and they had the knowledge. And so if I share the knowledge, then he's got the knowledge and he's faster. So I'm not going to do that. And so it takes some real secure managers, but it's like managers, if you're out there, like the most gratifying, I'm not going to project on you, but like to me, the most gratifying thing for me is walking around the trade show floor at MMC and seeing all the people that I know and knowing where they started and knowing where they are. And I'm not even saying I have a role.
Well, you had some role as your
sometimes
point.
Maybe, sometimes maybe, but I think even teaching CALP, like having them come up to me and say anything, like just the fact that they remembered me, I get really excited. But just like seeing that kind of growth and understanding that multifamily offers that, it offers that to anyone. And you don't have to come in with a bachelor's degree, like that's what this industry can be about, is like work and effort and initiative. And like, that's what I love to see out there, is that, those people have made it, they've escalated. And some of them I know for a fact it's because they said out loud, please help me.
Right.
And they took it when you gave it to them.
Right. And some people, in fairness, you and I have had this conversation, some people don't really even know to ask, right? They just don't know. And when you see that they're struggling, I think that that's where some of that, hey, I can literally visually see that they were struggling in an appointment or struggling with a phone call or whatever that scenario may be, where someone has to take the time and you're busy and you may not want to be diving into that right that moment, but in a leadership capacity, you probably need to do that, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's just some of that, and there's obviously a lot of variables to that. I don't really know any big secret magical thing
Come
at
on,
all.
secret sauce to
No, I
initiative.
don't really have that. The only thing that I do know that I would consider the secret sauce is what we've already touched on, that, just being genuine and nice and having that heart that just, and I really do mean that, having that heart that you're I think the revenue and the other things come when you're really looking out for others' interests. And it could be on the customer side even that, right?
Yeah.
We'd have people calling us that we'd worked with for years that have a situation and they trusted us so much that they would call us about things that really weren't part of our world from a professional,
right?
From the business standpoint,
Yeah. But they were.
But they were
Yeah.
indirectly, and they knew that we would help them.
Yeah.
And gosh, our world could use that on a lot of levels, right? But it really is, to me, it's more about that person, just like me. I wanted somebody to care about me. I wanted somebody to make me believe I could do it. I wanted, even though I didn't have the experience,
Yeah.
I didn't have the experience whatsoever. And had they not taken that initial interest in me, I was in the business for 30 years and had a tremendous time,
Yeah.
I think and obviously we're all needing to make money to live.
Yeah.
But that was never my driving force, never. So
Sorry, ringtone.
that's okay. That is okay. That's like time's up. You set an alarm.
I didn't set a timer. It probably is up, but I have to just give my list of like short things that I
no.
say all the time.
No.
And I just called him. I called him Nikki as in no, they're good. They're good. I have to go there. One of the things I learned from you early and often was control the controllables. And I still say it today.
You said it every day there.
Maybe every day. Yeah.
Yes.
It's obviously like ingrained, but I've used it in my personal life. I've talked to, Finley about it, because there are just some things that we can get real worked up about or hair on fire about that are completely outside of our control. And I think when you focus on those things, everything feels out of your control. But if you remind yourself there's always some piece of it that is within my control, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that well. And then I have to just let the rest of that go. So, lots of applications for that, personally, professionally, but I say it all the time. I say it to people here. I've said it to every company I've ever worked with at certain times. Look, I need you to control the controllables.
Right.
And that's always been one. We already said it, but training is a process, not an event. And I use it all the time because this is the other part, like we're our own enemy here. Like I'll have a manager meeting or something like that, and we'll go over something that day. And then everybody expects like full 100%, first of all, that they remember everything, that they recall it, that they know how to apply it, and then they go back and do it just from that 20-minute session or 40-minute session. And it's like, no. Like that is not a thing. You have to give it in nuggets. Like I think you used to say, it's like
good.
Like a little piece of candy at a time instead of the whole bag of candy. But, just understanding. And I think that goes back to like some empathy about understanding that not everybody learns at the same pace. And once you show that care, then maybe that person starts to come to you for help because they feel safe in that way. And I get to one like that in a minute. You also told me this. This is just side. I don't know. It's not really professional, but it is. You said, Katrina, when your kids are little, you need them. And you said, and when they're teenagers, they need you. Position yourself to be there when they need you. And as a mother of a 17-year-old.
I don't remember that.
You did. You met me. Finley was 5, I think, when you met me. I remember she brought her Barbies in while I filled out my paperwork.
Yes.
And she's so cute. She wants to be a guest on the podcast. We'll work on that. I told her she had to take it very seriously if she did it, but I think she's going to shop communities and then come report back because she's going to be in college next year. Nonetheless.
Unbelievable.
Oh, I don't even want to think about it. But you said that, and it, I have thought about that my whole career. And if I'm honest, it has fueled me. And I'm not saying I had a countdown to when my kid was a teenager necessarily, but it was like, it probably did fuel me to maybe put in more time, more hours, more effort, more energy. Not saying more than I do now necessarily. It's just different. But I wanted to get myself to a certain place so that way when my 16-year-old needed me, I could meet her where she needed me to be in that moment at that time. And it's not like I've had these like moments
No,
where I had to,
right.
but I mean, just like mental availability, physical, availability. I'm just, that's probably more for someone starting their career out. Like, push yourself, push now.
Well, I don't recall saying that specifically, but I can see where I think,
because your kids were teenagers at the time when I started with you. And so I think that
and
was retrospective
when you're
for you.
starting, everybody's like, oh, I'd love to stay home. After you initially have children, like, there's the, or at least in my day, it was mine are grown, right? But there was a focus on, oh, I'd love to stay home with my kids, kind of a conversation.
Yeah.
And you really have complete control at that point. So there's it really is different when they're older.
And there's no right or wrong. It was just
truly.
But it was good. It was good for me to hear that from you while F was little, so that way I could just keep pushing. So that way, now that she's 17, now she'd probably say she doesn't need me much. Although every day I get the text, what am I going to do with my life, Mom? I don't have this. Volleyball's over, so our lives are over, basically. It's funny. Number 4, you always said you have to earn the right to sell to people.
Oh my gosh, I still believe that
You're
much.
So right.
I so believe it.
You're so right. And you kind of just said it already. Like, it's about trust. They trusted us. You taught me to earn it.
And I remember, talk about mentoring. I remember just being part of conversations when I originally, when I first started at one of the locations, or one of the companies, and I remember witnessing some things, and keeping in mind that I had already worked with some of these customers for 15 years at that point. I had relationships with people for sure, and the business, the way that it was being handled or structured, where you talk about mentorship, that was a tough conversation, where, oh no, we won't be doing it that way anymore moving forward.
Yeah.
These are people that you have relationships with, and we're going to be honest and direct and all of those things, right?
Yeah.
So those types of things crop up all the time, but that's that really is.
That's a whole podcast in itself, like
right.
relationship selling, but you have to earn the right to sell to people. I use it all the time and can certainly elaborate if anybody wants to know. And then the last one, and I added this just today because you already said it once today, but like you would start feedback with, for what it's worth. And you would say that in appointments too with clients, especially when they would say something that, because of your exposure to great information and training on the inside, because we were at Fort Rent, like we got inside information and training, and somebody would say something, and I could see it in your face. You're like, that is not right at all. And you would just say, well, for what it's worth. And then you would just execute, you weren't, it was a way to like segue without being like, you weren't being combative. You weren't saying, I disagree.
Like, I know it all.
You weren't. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's like a fantastic, I just think it's like a really good phrase that kind of has a start stop, and it's permission to say whatever you want afterwards, because it's not attacking. It's not defying. It's not saying you're wrong. It's saying, for what it's worth, we just, went through this on the inside, and we learned this and we learned this and we learned that. And then you're just like stating facts, and you didn't have to hurt anyone.
Right. It's, and here's a nugget for you in your next chapter of parenting.
I'm ready.
Oh gosh, if my kids listen to this, they're going to be like, oh my
I'm
word.
sending it to them.
But another little nugget, and this is so true, because when people, and it's applicable to business too, right?
Yeah.
But even to just change the comment where with your kids, because you're parenting at this stage where you do have control, right? And
Yeah.
you don't
sort of.
Well, yeah, I guess that is true. But where you don't want to be like, well, if I were you, I would, that
Sure.
type of thing.
Yeah.
But you might consider. Oh yeah, because
What
they
would
don't want
motivate
your
you to say it
advice,
like that? You used to
right?
say that too. What would motivate you to say it like
Katrina,
that? You
you're
might
like-
consider.
You're like really pulling these things.
No,
out
I'm a
here.
I listened a lot.
Apparently closer than I realized.
Oh, you watch. People are watching you. This has been my favorite, and neither of us cried, which I think is good, because we've been really close over the years in different ways, and we've had talks like this a lot, and I'm just happy that you were willing to come make some of these talks public And, sorry, Britt, you didn't get invited. She wanted to come on here so bad. There are so many times I wanted to say, well, yeah, like when you would tell Brittany to say it like Katrina did.
Yeah.
Just because you're so competitive.
But, right. You guys used to gang up on me. I'm so glad. Yes, when you originally were talking, you were trying to get me to do this. And you're like, well, what if I have Britt come too?
Yeah, it was going to be a
I thought, oh my gosh, they will gang up on me. No, I'm kidding. In the most fun way. I had an absolute a dream job back then with all the team that we had. It was fabulous. So.
Yeah, it would have been a love fest if Britt was here. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I hope that if you're out there listening, either you're in a position to mentor someone or you are, in a place where I hope recognize that finding a mentor is really important. And then just asking for that, like asking you shall receive. If you're starting to be that person that's new in the business and you're just saying like, please help me, please help me.
Yeah. Raise your hand, right?
Please help me. And listening to this podcast and subscribing and liking it is probably a good move too. So just, I can mentor you through podcast.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for pushing me to just to do it. Cause it's obviously you get comfortable and I had not had the experience and obviously always great to be with you, but thank you very much for inviting me.
You're welcome. Yeah.